In a letter Donald Trump posted to Truth Social, the former president's attorney, John Rowley, and James Trusty write to Attorney General Merrick Garland requesting a meeting, saying, quote, "at your earliest convenience to discuss the ongoing injustice that is being perpetrated by your special counsel and his prosecutors." The letter also reads, "Unlike President Biden, his son Hunter, and the Biden family, no president of the United States has ever in the history of our country been baselessly investigated in such an outrageous and unlawful fashion." Meanwhile, new reporting from the Wall Street Journal reveals that in a meeting last year, federal prosecutors were informed of investigators' quote, "longstanding concerns about irregularities in the handling of the Department of Justice's investigation into Hunter Biden." This is what the lawyer for an IRS whistleblower said in a May 17th letter.
The IRS agent, who has not been publicly identified, also mentioned concerns after the October 2022 meeting in a call with federal prosecutors. After that conversation, he and his investigative team were, quote, "no longer invited to any further prosecutorial team calls and meetings on the case, effectively excluding them from the case," wrote Levitt, who is president of Eisenhower Oversight Whistleblowers and Research, a nonprofit focused on oversight of government and corporate wrongdoing, the Wall Street Journal writes.
So we're getting down to it.
Yeah, so basically this is being, it is predicted that this is a flag that we're nearing the indictment phase, that soon we're going to get an actual indictment about Trump's handling of the classified documents case, which legal experts have opined is one of the stronger cases, much stronger than the New York document malfeasance case related to Stormy Daniels and the payment of these sex workers. So, I mean, this is an interesting question. We're not talking about this story because Donald Trump is truthing it on Truth Social or whatever you call tweets over
truthing
on.
It. There's truths.
They're truths.
They're truths.
He's launching truths over on this other app.
He's truthing.
He is, of course, allowed to come back to Twitter now, but has chosen not to do so.
Twitter is an unfriendly site. Twitter is a DeSantis site.
Sure. Now, it is. I mean, it's an interesting question how much of Elon Musk's alignment with DeSantis is partly motivated by Donald Trump's refusal to come back to Twitter and be the activity generator and the money generator that he used to be over there. But that aside, do you think
it's a little bit like Succession? They pick the candidate they think is going to be good for content. The organization does, right? And this is not spoilers for the most recent episode.
You know I haven't watched the last episode.
Still?
I know. I've been busy. What can I say, Robby? But
no, you gave me a long time to finish The Last of Us.
You did. I did. So this is the question, though. Do you think the fact that we continue to report on Trump over at Truth Social, do you think that Trump's continued ability to get a lot of support from the base around the idea that he is being unfairly prosecuted by liberals, the Biden administration, and that there is an inequity between how the Bidens have been treated by the DOJ versus how Trump has been treated by the DOJ, is evidence of his continued influence and advantage going into a general election context?
Well, I think he will always have a point, and he will always recruit or have people on his side remembering why they like him when he rails against the unfairness of it, when he points out that, in his case, you have everyone from every powerful, elite, mainstream journalistic institution and law enforcement screaming that he's the most guilty son of a gun on the face of the earth. At the same time, you had, prominent intelligence officials saying there's nothing to see here with regard to Hunter Biden laptop, et cetera. So the unfairness, is something that he speaks to and that many Republican voters feel viscerally, that the bias involved in the coverage and everything else is so palpable and so obvious, and that it makes them feel more loyal to Trump. But that's his people, which is not enough people to become president again, is my view, because it wasn't enough last time. And I don't think there are people out there, I have yet to meet one, who didn't like Trump last time but likes him now because, he's being persecuted. I didn't think that before. I wouldn't vote for him, but now I think he's being persecuted. If you thought he was being persecuted, you thought it all along, and you probably think he won in 2020, and you want him to win again, fine. But Trump needs to bring new people into his coalition, maybe not to get the nomination, but to win the election, he does.
Right, but let's stay with the nomination first.
Well, the nomination could very well be his. You're very bullish on Trump's prospects, so I have to play the contrarian, present the DeSantis side. But I do not think. I think it's going to be close. I think either of them could get it. I would not at all be surprised if Trump gets the nomination again. And people will certainly point to things like his treatment in these several criminal matters, these investigations, as creating a rally around the Trump effect. As the reason for that.
Yeah, I noticed.
It may very well be the case.
A lot of leftists were very skeptical after Marianne Williamson's announcement, for instance, and I've seen kind of swings of increased support every time there is a blatant disrespect of her. When Karine Jean-Pierre had the press room laughing at her and called her crystal ball lady. When the polls leave her out of the calculations, even though she's, polling at, I think the most recent one was 11%. At that times, even people who have been very non-committal about her prospects will jump in and say, this is unfair, and circle the wagons. And I do take your point about Trump needing to grow his base for the general election. But prior to these announcements, the conversation was, well, are people they like Trump, but they're over all of the drama. They're over having to defend 1-6. They're over having to talk about these legal cases. So they'll drift over to Ron DeSantis. They like them both. I do think that there has been a similar circling of the wagons as Trump has very astutely, created this grievance monster and kind of put himself at the root of a kind of a victimization of the broader federal government. And as people like Ron DeSantis try to play into a broader concern with the overreach of the FBI, the intelligence agencies, et cetera, it's hard to make that case and to capture that energy from the Republican base without acknowledging that Trump is victim number one in many people's minds of that political persecution. And we saw this in one of the first statements from Ron DeSantis, where he spoke directly about Donald Trump. He tried to thread the needle saying, political prosecution is bad and the FBI is bad, but I don't know anything about paying prostitutes. Remember that little soundbite? And I don't know how well he's going to be able to manage saying, yes, it is unfair what the government is doing, but also don't have sympathy for Donald Trump.
Well, that's what remains to be seen. Can he sell that line to Republican primary voters? Because there's two kinds of Republicans. There are Republicans who love Trump and Republicans who love Trump but will accept a Trumpy, non-Trump candidate. And the question is, are there enough of those to overcome the ones that just love Trump? Yeah. And we don't know. And can they because that second group still loves Trump, so they have to be persuaded that DeSantis can steal the deal. They have to be persuaded that, they have to overcome their natural love of Trump but DeSantis is more electable, or DeSantis is more of this, or DeSantis is better at that. And DeSantis has to make that case to them. He has to prove it. Yeah. So every slip up creates doubt in their head that that's the case. They go back to Trump. Exactly. And I don't think Trump can really. Trump is creating more doubt about himself in a sense that he's just had a certain number of people, your moderate, your affluent suburbanites, those women disproportionately, just kind of exiting the Republican Party in general. Maybe the theory is DeSantis could win some of those back in a general. That's not going to really matter for the Republican primaries, though. Also, the women issue and the abortion issue in DeSantis is a big problem. Donald Trump at least has the insight to understand that you can't be too heavy-handed on that stuff. It obviously threw the midterms in a big way for Democrats last year. To your point about electability, 54% of potential Republican primary voters say Trump has the best chance of defeating Biden, compared to just 25% who say DeSantis. This is from a Morning Consult poll from the end of April. I think you're right about electability, and I think unless something changes soon, that's really bad news for Ron DeSantis. Yeah, and one of the best arguments he could make is one that does not just sit well with the Republican primary voters, which is, I would say that if I was DeSantis, I'd be like, look, Trump lost. We know he's not a good person to go up against Biden because we already did it and he lost. But nobody wants to hear, nobody in Republican primary voters don't want to hear the words, Trump lost 2020. They want to not talk about that. Yeah, well, we all know that there are many people who aren't saying Trump lost 2020, who are spinning a very different narrative. And that might ultimately inure to, like it or not, Donald Trump's benefit in the long run. The last thing I'd just say about this is that I would be concerned that Trump focusing so much on his own
persecution and that kind of grievance politics might ultimately be a turnoff to voters who are going to start to ask, what are you doing for me, though? The fact that Ron DeSantis is so focused on wokeness, however, which is also not an issue that is going directly to these kitchen table issues, might enable Donald Trump, frankly, to coast on that grievance politics for a little longer. If I were giving advice to Ron DeSantis, I would say the way that you can outflank Trump is not the confidence, the charisma, the electability argument necessarily, but being able to make Trump's preoccupations look small and petty by actually explaining how you're going to deliver to the American public. Of course, you'd have to have a plan on how you're going to be able to deliver to working class voters, which I, from my humble position here as a left populist, don't think either candidate has sufficiently. But we'll see.
Well, maybe Ron DeSantis will come knocking for Briahna Joy Gray's political advice.
Yeah, I'm not for hire. We'll have my rising right after this.